Hello, and welcome back to the Best for Baby podcast. I am your host, Lisa Rogers Sargent, and as you know, I'm a paediatric physiotherapist out to spread the word on how to prevent a number of pitfalls in modern parenting that are leading to some difficulties in the health and well-being of our babies. However, today I am very excited to be starting a little mini series on perhaps you could say the opposite, which is how to promote the health and well-being of our babies. So, this little series is going to take you through stage by stage of development in babies and give you really easy, really lovely little activities and stimulation techniques that you can be doing with your baby. And I'm hoping that they're going to be really simple, and because they age appropriate to every age or stage your baby's at, they're going to be easy to implement. And so, to begin with, today we're going to be looking at from your newborn baby to about 3 months. Now, I say that with a bit of a caveat because we know nowadays, because of these pitfalls of modern parenting, we are seeing babies develop at a much slower rate than what they used to. So, although I might be saying up to 3 months, you may find that your baby doesn't achieve what I'm talking about today by the 3 month stage, and actually, they're only really doing these things by 4 or 5 months. And that's absolutely fine. It just means that we should really, instead of talking about ages, I should be talking about stages. So that once your baby has achieved everything in today's episode, then you would move on to the next stage or the next episode of the podcast. But the reason I do just kind of give an age range is because a lot of babies will fall into that range still, but also it's just easier. It's quicker for me to say 0 to 3 months and for you to kind of visualize what a baby looks like at that stage. However, I will also at the end of the episode say the things to look out for. So if your baby isn't doing these things at the moment, then perhaps you could get some extra help or chat to your GP or your health visitor to see if anything else needs to be done to support your baby and to kind of help them to boost their development ever so slightly. But for most of you, I think if your baby is able to do those things that I say at the end of the episode, you wouldn't have to worry, even if they are much older than what I've started to indicate. So I hope that makes sense, but I'm going to say it each episode and I'm going to kind of clarify as we go along. So to begin with, the first 3 months, a lot of people refer to it as the fourth trimester. And this is because, we have 3 trimesters in pregnancy and then babies are born almost too early. But if they had stayed in for another 3 months, they would be too big to get out. So they come out, but they're not quite ready for the world yet. And so what I want to say to you is in this stage, all you really need to be focused on is surviving, particularly in the first 2 weeks. So really take your time. It doesn't have to be 3 months and it can extend longer. But what it's about is just settling into a bit of a rhythm, not even a routine. It's a bit of a rhythm at this stage. And the other important thing, the reason why I bring up it being like a fourth trimester where a baby's not quite ready for the outside world, is that these little babies are born and they crave you. They crave to be held and in close proximity with you, particularly in those first 3 months. And what we find, it's almost like every inch of their skin is crying out to be in contact with your skin. And so we just bear this in mind because a lot of what we're going to be doing, particularly as we go on to getting closer to the end of this stage of development, is having a baby being comfortable, being away from you and being on the floor. But when I say that, I'm not meaning put them down and leave. I'm meaning you are still in very close proximity to your baby when they are not being held by you. So that's something to bear in mind. And when I say that close proximity, I mean not only so that they can see you, so you're quite close to them, so they can make out your facial features, firstly. Secondly, they can smell you. And thirdly, they can feel you, so your hands are on them. So we're still respecting that craving, that desire of theirs to be in contact with you, even though we are separating them from you, by really making sure that they know how close you are to them in those three ways. Of course, we're going to use your voice as well to add to the stimulation and the soothing and the calming and to reinforce the fact that you are near to them. But the closeness comes from your touch, then being able to focus on your face because you're close enough, and being able to smell you. So we are using those three ways as well as our voices to reassure them that we are really close. So if I can give you the objectives for this first stage of development in terms of categories of things you're going to do with your baby, they look at napping and how we're going to introduce different ways to nap. Then we're going to be looking at trying to do as much skin to skin as we can in the first 3 months. Now, I'm not going to go into all the benefits of skin to skin. However, there are many of those. You know, it's temperature regulation for the baby, bonding, calming for the baby, brain development for the baby. And then there's a whole host of benefits for the person doing the skin to skin as well. So it's a really lovely thing to do. And we often think it's important in the first hours after birth. But actually, there's a lot of evidence for the first 3 months of life to be doing skin to skin. So in case you don't know much about it, it's just where you take off your baby's clothes, but you can leave on a nappy for obvious reasons, and you put them in that state, so pretty much naked, against your naked skin. So ideally you would wear a button-up shirt or a hoodie that you can zip open. You expose yourself, keep your bra on if you want to, and you then put your baby, his chest or her chest against your chest. And then you can put a blanket or close your shirt over the back of them to keep them nice and warm. And the idea is then that they spend time like that with their bare skin against your bare skin. So for the first 3 months, you're going to try and make time to do this whenever you can. And the third thing that you're going to be considering in this stage of development is swaddling. Now, I'm not going to go into it because I've spoken about it a lot, and I've got a video tutorial on when to swaddle, how to swaddle, why you need to swaddle. And it's all basically because our babies are sleeping on their backs because that's the safest way for them to sleep, but it makes life a little bit less comfortable for them. And so the swaddling kind of rectifies that in some way, but it needs to be done correctly. And you need to reduce the amount of swaddling you do as your baby gets older beyond this stage. But all you need to know is that you want to perfect that because that's going to help your baby's overnight sleep or wherever they're sleeping on their backs. So I will put a link in the show notes to a free tutorial on swaddling. It's a really quick video. And as I say, it's free, so you might as well download it and get comfortable with that because that's the perfect thing for the first 3 months. So I'm going to talk you through the first 2 weeks, then the second 2 weeks, and then from 4 weeks up till 3 months, because I think that first month is very different from the next 2 months. Let's face it, the first 2 weeks, you are literally just trying to not establish anything. You're just trying to survive. So if you are bottle feeding, try and get the hang of that within 2 weeks. If you are breastfeeding, you may need a lot longer than 2 weeks to get it established. I often see moms that are closer to the 3-month stage before they really have breastfeeding down and comfortable and easy, because it is a tricky thing. And some babies are born with teeny tiny mouths and other kinds of difficulties that make it more tricky. So really, giving yourself time to survive that is the most important thing, particularly in the first 4 weeks. However, in those first 2 weeks, what we really want to do is just get into a bit of a rhythm, not a routine, not timed, just a rhythm of those feeds happening and skin to skin time happening. Also, what we're going to do is let our babies, because remember they're going to be asleep most of the time in those first 2 weeks, so we're going to allow them to nap on our chest, on their tummies. Now, what is essential here is that this needs to be done safely. So a lot of people would say we don't allow people to let their babies sleep on their chest, and this is true if you're not following guidelines to make sure it's safe. The key here is that you have to be awake. Your baby has got to be supervised if they're on their tummies and asleep. And so you have to be awake watching them. If you are so comfortable with your baby on your chest that you think you may fall asleep or you start to get drowsy, you have to get up, put your baby to sleep on their back and then you have a nap next to them in a bed. But you cannot let your baby sleep on your chest if you fall asleep. Secondly, you have to be monitoring their breathing. They have to have a clear and open airway. And at this stage, babies will sleep with their head rotated completely to one side when they are on their tummies. And even when they're awake on their tummies, they're not strong enough to be holding up their heads. So the head will be turned completely to the side with the cheek against your chest. And what you're going to be making sure of is that where their little nose and mouth is, you don't have all your hair hanging over them, or the armrest of your sofa that you've just snuggled into, or a great big scatter cushion. There has to be an open space around the baby's nose and mouth that they can breathe beautifully and clearly. I always say, if you're going to have your baby napping on your chest, don't do it if you are alone in the house. Do it only if there's somebody else in the house and you can say to them, we're going to lie down, I'm going to watch telly, and my baby's going to nap on my chest. Please check on me every few minutes to make sure I haven't fallen asleep. Because you've got to make sure it is really safe. The other thing you might start to consider at this stage is looking, the first time your baby has a nap on your chest, have they turned their head towards their right hand or their left hand? And then later, make sure that their head is turned in the opposite direction to what they did earlier. This way, we're going to start to notice if they have a preference. And if they do have a preference, by getting them to turn in both directions, it's going to stretch out any kind of asymmetry in the neck muscles. So that's it. In the first 2 weeks, you're learning how to swaddle your baby so that they can sleep at night on their backs swaddled. You might introduce 1 or 2 maybe daytime naps for your baby where they are on their tummies on your chest and you're making it safe for them to be there and you're awake and supervising them. The other lovely thing when they're sleeping on your chest is you can put a hand on their back and feel their breathing. Feel their little back must be moving so you know they're breathing nicely. And making sure the head is in both directions. And if you can, we're doing some skin to skin at the same time as the nap. So you're ticking 2 boxes at the same time. For the next 2 weeks, what we are focused on is enabling your baby to have awake windows where they are calm. So I've spoken about states quite a lot, and I'm not going to get into it again, but the optimal state for a baby to be stimulated in, for a baby later on to play in and to learn in, is when they are calm and awake. So they're not overstimulated, they're not hungry, they're not fussy, they're not with a dirty nappy, they're not tired, they're not crying, they're not irritated by something. So it's the calm, alert state. And that is when they're going to be available for learning and their brain is going to take in whatever stimulation it is that you're giving to them. So in this state, baby is calm, obviously. They're not moving and scrunching up their faces. They might have quite a soft, open face, and they might be making a bit of eye contact with you. So all we want to do is start to create times when your baby can be in that state, not against you. So you're going to lie them on their backs in this time. And there are 2 ways you can do it. You can either sit on the floor with your back leant against a sofa and your feet on the ground. So your thighs are creating like a little bed for the baby to lie on their back and look at you. Their feet might be then against your belly, or you could bend their legs up so their legs are against your body and their little bottom is against your belly. And this way, you're really close to them. They're actually still being held by you. So some of that craving for you is reduced because they are being held by you and they can feel that. They can see you very nicely and they can smell you. And in this time, we're now going to start really just getting them used to changes in your voice. So you may do gentle, calm singing. Remember, we always want to try and sing low and have that low sort of vibration sound, as opposed to the high and squeaky. That's a little bit too stimulating for them. So you might do some calm singing, just looking at them, making sure you are close enough for them to see you. Sorry, I didn't tell you the second way to do it is to put your baby lying on their back on the ground and you sit on the floor as well. Now your legs will be out in front of you and your feet coming towards each other, not quite touching. And in that way, you will see that your legs form almost like a diamond shape. And then what you can do is take a really flat, soft cushion and put that over your feet, and then lie your baby on that cushion on top of your feet so that their head and upper body is on that cushion and just the little bottom is on the ground. Then you can get close to them and their feet will be right in your hands or even maybe against your tummy again as well. And you're going to bend forward over them. Now, these are really nice positions. I'm going to explain in a moment why I like it in terms of where the baby's looking when you are in this position. But the main thing is, as I said, you're nice and close to them so they can see you and their eyes are going to focus on your face. Now, as I'd started to explain, what you're going to be doing here is the low, calming singing and changing your voice ever so slightly. So they're getting that lovely stimulation from different things you're saying, singing to them while they're learning to focus on your face. Now, with this focusing and eye contact, we're just spending time teaching them to build eye contact here with you. And what is important about this position is that your baby is going to be looking almost downwards towards you. So we are going to place our faces where they're not directly above the baby's eyes, because then the baby's going to almost tilt the head upwards to see you. We want them to tilt their heads slightly downwards to see you, which means that you're moving the little chin towards the little chest. And later, when they're lying on their backs and you are holding a toy for them to look at, you're going to hold it above their chest or above their tummy. So again, we're always stimulating or motivating a baby to look ever so slightly downwards towards their body, not up and extend their necks, because later this can become quite a bad habit and they're going to learn to do it anyway. What we want is to stimulate those deep neck flexors and later the tummy muscles as they start to bring the head downwards. So you sitting in that position, you are encouraging eye contact with you and focus on your face, you humming, you singing, you doing those sorts of things, and just spending time with them, being off you but awake and available to be stimulated in this way. Here, remember that they're smelling you all the time, but the third thing was the hands-on. Now, I've spoken about in a previous podcast episode on baby massage, something we call supportive holds. So in this stage, we're not doing baby massage. We're just kind of holding their limbs or their trunks or their heads in a certain way that they can feel our hands, and it's supporting a bit of the weight of that body part. So here you could put your hands under your baby's legs and just lift ever so slightly so that the legs are resting in your hands. You could gently press the feet upwards towards the body so the hips and knees bend and hold while you're singing and making eye contact and just holding them in that position. You could put your hands on top of their little shoulders and ever so slightly press downwards. But a firm favorite of mine would be to put your hands under their elbows so that their hands naturally come together. And what we're going to talk more about is helping your baby to bring their hands to their midline. The midline just means the middle of their body. And the most kind of helpful way is when their little hands come to their mouths and they suck on the part of the hand at the base of the thumb. We don't want them bringing their thumbs into their mouths or their fingers into their mouths. But if they can learn over time to start sucking the base of the thumb, that part of the hand, just sucking on there or holding the hands together, that's a soothing activity for babies. So if you put your hand under their elbows and just let their forearms sort of drop onto their chest where their hands will come together and hold them there, they're going to start exploring their hands, playing with their fingers, maybe even bringing the little hand to the mouth. And then at the same time, they might be looking at you into your eyes and you're cooing and singing and doing your little thing. The other thing we might do at this stage is you could keep the trousers on, but make sure the little feet are bare and you bring the foot soles together. Again, that's bringing the feet into the midline. It's not going to be above the tummy or the chest. It's just down where their legs naturally hang, and we're bringing the feet together. So each foot sole is feeling the other foot sole, basically. So that's it really for the next 2 weeks, roughly. So you kind of understand that that first month is just about getting the major things established for you, learning how to bath your baby, change your baby, feed your baby, and swaddle your baby, establishing night sleep if possible. Again, there's a podcast episode on sleep, how to do that, knowing that the swaddling might happen. And then in the daytime, we're now having some naps on the tummy, on your chest only. We nowhere else are they napping on their tummies, just on your chest where it's safe and supervised because you're awake. And as I said, we're introducing a little bit of the stimulatory things, particularly the eye contact and the listening, and building time that they can lie on their backs without being against you and be calm and be happy and to feel you and to know you're there. Once they're good at that, you may achieve that before 4 weeks. Then you can start to up it slightly. However, if you are not quite there and your baby's already 4 weeks, keep going with this until this is all settled and easy and you know your baby's ready for more. And so from whatever time that is, up until roughly the 3-month mark, or when they're ready to move on to the next stage, it's really just a build on those foundations. So if we look at what I said, we're going to be looking at the naps firstly. So the start was napping on the chest. Now we're going to look at napping on their sides and on their tummies during the day, but not only on you, in something we call a safe space. That might be on the floor for you. It might be somewhere else, but the key is that it's not on you. Now, I'm not going to really get into what a safe space is because I've done this so many times on this podcast, and I've done a recent episode on sleep, and in there it talks about a safe space. I've done an episode on tummy time, which talks about the safe space, and I've done another episode more recently where I went into depth about the safe space. So in the show notes, I will put safe space and links to those episodes. But if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say a safe space, don't do it. Make sure you know what I'm talking about so that your baby can nap safely on their tummies or their sides during the day. And the other thing is, these naps are only during the day. I know I'm hammering home, but it's because we have to be safe. Only during the day when you are supervising your baby. So for the next stage now, the naps are going from the chest into a safe space, but they're supervised and they're happening on the tummy or on the side. And the one thing we're going to make sure of is that when our babies are sleeping on their tummies, if they're looking to the one side, next time they're going to be looking to the other side. And if they're sleeping on their sides in the safe space during the day, if they sleep on their left side the first time, the next time we're going to make sure they sleep on the right side. Okay, so those are the only key things there, but that is the build on naps. The second build will be those awake times when your baby is lying on their back. You're still going to do it in those same two positions, either with you sitting with your back against the sofa and the baby's lying on your thighs, or baby's on the floor and you sitting over your baby. And what we're going to do now is we're going to spend longer there, and we're going to up that eye contact as a start. And so initially we were making them focus on your face because your smell and your voice will have drawn them to your face and they know it. Now we're going to get them to look at something else. So you can start with your black and white contrast toy or your contrast card, and you get them to look at it, and then we're going to move it and make them follow it. Now, still the same as before, and actually always the same, is making sure that we start with the toy being held in the same place as we had our faces, which is over their chest or over their tummies, not in their eye contact, because as I said, we don't want them to extend their head back. So we hold the card over the chest, we give them a moment to focus, make sure they're looking, and then you really, really slowly are going to move it to the side. Really slowly, go by their speed. If they stop following, you go back, you get them to fix on it again, and you repeat. Ideally, you would go as far as they can in one direction, and then you would let them come back to the middle. Then you would go in the opposite direction as far as you can. But you might find that they need a few attempts to get going. So you're building up over time, just getting them to track that moving toy, that bright object, to the side and back to the middle, to the other side and back to the middle. Then what we're going to do is also get them to track downwards. So we're going to make them look even further downwards, moving that little chin towards the chest. And as they get stronger and stronger, it will get closer and closer until they squish their little chins into a double chin, if you know what I mean. Initially, you might find only the baby's eyes move and look downwards because they're not strong enough yet to tilt the head as well. But over time, that's what we're trying to get them to achieve and to learn and to be strong enough to do, is to look downwards. We're never going to practice moving the object upwards to make them look up and move their chin away from their chest. That they are going to learn by themselves, and we do practice that when they're on their tummy, and that's a far more functional and better way for the muscles to practice that extension, we call it, is when they're doing it on their tummies. So when they're lying on their backs, we're only helping them to look downwards, starting already where they're fixing at something slightly below their eye level and side to side. Now here is the perfect time to notice if your baby is unable to look all the way to one side and can only look all the way to the other side. And this is where we are identifying the head turning preference. I'm hoping by this stage your baby has spent a lot of time napping on your chest, looking to this one side and then looking to the other side. So if they did have a head turning preference, it's already almost rectified. And now we can strengthen in both directions with them looking to both sides. Obviously, to progress that, you will use something less contrasty. So you might then move to just a colored toy from black, white, red, or black and white. You then move to a colored toy, and over time you can maybe move to something pastel color. So it's just upping the ante every time, making it a tiny bit more difficult. So that's the tracking and the progress over time that we're going to do with that. The second thing we're going to progress is the supportive holds. Now, I had spoken before about my favorite one where we support under the elbows and the hands come to the midline. Now what we're going to try and do is support their hands to the belly. Now what is amazing here is if you can get the hands to touch the bare skin of the belly so they can start to explore there a little bit. So if you can undo a few buttons and get the hand inside the baby grow and you support under the elbows, that's lovely. You can also help them just by supporting their arms, bring their hands together in different areas, bring their hands down towards their legs, and maybe then, because your hands will be busy moving their arms, use your face instead of holding a toy to get them to track or move their heads to look downwards, and then you put their hands where they are looking so they see what they're touching. So initially that will be the tummy, and then it might even be the thighs if you can get the hands to reach to the thighs. Again, it's a bonus if they can touch a naked thigh, because then they get the double sensation. They feel it through the thigh and they feel it through the hand as well. So that's lovely. And then really, as your baby gets much older and you've been doing this a lot, you might help them to reach for their knees. You might start to lift their legs up so they can start to touch lower down on their legs, and eventually you'd be supporting them to hold their feet. A lot of babies will be nowhere near this stage at 3 months, but some babies might actually start to lift up their legs and grab their feet. But what we want to do is just to be helping them in these supportive holds where we are letting their hands touch their bodies and their hands touch each other. Now, what goes hand in hand with that is the feet. Because the feet are not going to be touching the body and exploring, we need to give them as much stimulation as possible, because the hands will start now to explore and to be touching the body. So the hands are getting lovely stimulation. And so we want to do the same for the feet, because the more you stimulate the feet, the more they are aware of their feet and the more they are motivated to try and grab their feet. So we might start again. Remember when they were a little bit smaller, we brought the foot soles together. Now what we might start doing is rubbing the foot soles up and down against each other. We might rub the little foot soles on the ground where they are lying. We might tap the little feet alternatively, tap, 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 tap like this on the ground. You might just do the heels. You could do the flat foot and then rub, rub, rub. Clap the feet together. You can massage the feet. You can introduce different sensations, different textures to the little feet. And that is just really drawing their attention to their feet and stimulating the feet whilst they are there. Then, of course, we're going to be doing our supportive hold by, as I said, the progression before was lifting up the legs and bringing the hands towards different parts of the legs, either starting at the thighs, then the knees, and moving to the lower leg and feet. And we hold them in that position. So it's not these great big movements, it's just kind of bringing them into a position and letting their body rest in your hands in that position. So that's the progression of the supportive holds. And obviously what goes along really nicely with that is the tracking downwards and the reaching with the hands. You're encouraging all of that to take place at the same time because you are upping your tracking, you're upping your hand stimulation, and you're upping your foot stimulation. So baby is going to be doing what we want them to be doing on their back, which is kind of curling up, bringing the head towards the feet. And with all of that, the next thing that we would add in at this stage, definitely after a month, and some babies might not be ready for it until later, particularly if you have an ex-premature baby, is baby massage. Now, I've briefly referred to who might be ready for baby massage and who might not be, but I've done a podcast episode on baby massage, so that's why I'm not getting into all the ins and outs of it. But please do go and listen to that episode. Again, I can put it in the show notes to refer you to it, so that if you are wanting to start introducing baby massage, just go and listen to that episode, make sure you know what you're doing. And again, there's links in there to all the YouTube videos on how to do the massage, when to do the massage, all of that. Because after a month is when we're going to probably start gently introducing in the various techniques of baby massage. And this is, of course, very stimulating for the baby, but it's also got huge benefits for the caregiver. So it's a lovely thing to do. And when I'm giving you all these progressions and these techniques when your baby's lying on their back, you're not going to do everything in one go. You're going to pick one thing and do it. So you might not do the tracking and the holds and the lifting the legs and the foot stimulation. You might just do massage. And then tomorrow you might do the foot stimulation, and then the next day, or maybe the next nappy change, you'll do the tracking. So you just do little bits. This is to give you a toolbox so that you can pick an activity according to your baby's state and when your baby is ready. We've spoken about the progression of the naps into the safe space during the day on tummy and side, but we also want to do awake time in these calm, alert states on the tummy and on the side. Now, if you haven't managed to establish your baby being on their back doing these calm alert states with you close by, you can try it on their tummies or sides, but don't be too worried if you're not getting it. Maybe try and get it right on their back first, where you get a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, where you are doing these lovely stimulations on their back before you try and do it on the tummy and the side. And it's not because I think it's harder for baby. I think sometimes we are more concerned and more worried about handling our babies, getting them onto their tummies, getting them on their sides, and so it doesn't go as well or as easy. So give yourself time to be confident in your handling of your baby and what you're doing with them in this calm, alert state before you try and make it a bit more challenging for yourself by getting them on their side or their tummy. So what we're going to do is, in the awake tummy time, remember, baby is crying out to be held by you still at this stage. So get close. If they're on their tummy, lie with them face to face. Now, if it's probably going to be a little baby who's lying flat with the head turned to one side with the cheek against the ground, even though they're awake, they may well be lifting their head and turning it to the other side, because newborn babies are actually born with a reflex that enables them to do that. So your 3-month-old baby might be lifting their head and holding it up quite nicely, but don't worry if they're not. If you are starting closer to the 4-week stage, your baby's probably just lying with their head down and maybe lifting it, holding it up for a second and then turning it. And what you want to be doing is encouraging that turning from side to side and lifting, and then spending a little longer lifted by moving yourself to be face to face with them there, or putting something really interesting like a mirror or a contrast toy just in front of them, so that when they lift, there's this great motivation to hold the head up for a beat before turning it to the other side. A lovely, lovely way to do this is on your chest. Awake tummy time on the chest, because you're really kind of face to face with your baby and you cooing. And if they drop their head forward, it just falls onto you where it's a bit softer. And then you can slowly start to move the elbows closer to the body, because by the end of this stage of development, what you are aiming for is that your baby is leaning on their elbows with the elbow positioned directly below the shoulder, much like you would hold yourself in an elbow plank. The difference here is that their body is flat on the ground, it's not elevated. And once that perfect elbow position is achieved, the baby's going to be able to lift their head much easier and then be lying either on the ground face to face with you or on their chest, on their elbows face to face with you. And here we can do the cooing, the eyeing, that stimulation. If your baby is battling, a firm hand on the bottom will help them. It's kind of anchors the bottom so that it makes it that much easier for them to lift their head. So this is where we are happy to encourage that extension where they lift the chin away from the chest because they are on their tummies, ideally with the little elbow directly below the shoulder. And we're starting to build up that lovely strength down the back of the neck and the back. Then from there, we're going to look at awake side lying time. So here you will let your baby balance on their side. You may sit behind them and they could lean their back against your crossed legs, or you could put a hand on the bottom to balance. But you want to withdraw that support after time. So they're working hard to balance on their side. And for that reason, you need to make sure if they've been lying on their left side doing the activity, next time you do it, you're going to do it on the right side. So both sides get a chance to work those muscles and learn to balance. And here, what is really important is that you put a toy that they're going to look at, or you draw their focus down to in front of their chest or in front of their belly. So it's the same as when they're lying on their back. What we are aiming to avoid is them looking upwards and moving their chin away from their chest, because that, when they're lying on their side, can often lead to an overarch and baby bends their entire body backwards into a backward C shape. So we draw their vision towards an object that is just in front of them, but in line with their chest or their tummy. Here, you might also put their little hands together so that they can start exploring their hands, playing with their fingers. And if your baby's nice and relaxed, you can bend up their hips and knees and almost bring their hands down towards their legs so they can have a little play there on their sides. Another thing you would want to avoid is putting anything behind their heads when they're lying on their sides, because very often that will draw them to press backwards into it and then to overextend those muscles. So put some support from shoulder level downwards if you need to, and then try and withdraw it and encourage them to look slightly downwards towards their legs and hands together, having a nice little play there awake. You could also lie with them and again put a hand on the hip, a nice heavy hand so they feel you, and you're singing, you're cooing, letting them focus on you there as well. Now, the last kind of thing I like to introduce, definitely after the 4-week stage, and just to get them ready to enjoy movement later on, is we call it vestibular stimulation, which basically just means moving the head through space. So that's things like swinging and rocking, which you're going to be doing naturally with your baby anyway. We do it to calm our babies. But remember, when you do it, you want it in a nice kind of calm rhythm. You don't want to make it like jerky and shaky. It must be comfortable for them. So lots of that kind of rocking and bouncing your baby is a nice thing to do here. If you're watching your baby's head move safely, obviously they don't have head control, so it's a supported movement, but it's those big movements of the body through space. And so with that, some nice little things you can do is, if you've got a gym ball, like sit on the gym ball, hold your baby close against you with their head supported, do some bouncing there. In the park, you can sit in a swing if you've got a sling on, so your baby's safe, and you can swing yourself in a swing. That's really nice. And another one is if you've got 2 people, to lie your baby in a blanket or a towel, and someone at the foot end of the baby holds the 2 corners and someone at the head end holds the 2 corners. You wouldn't close them because you want it open so that baby can breathe and see. And you gently rock baby from side to side. You create a hammock with the towel or the blanket. The key here is to make sure head is higher than the bottom, and it's gentle and it's predictable. Again, I've spoken about, swinging, rocking, stimulation that needs to be predictable and monotonous so it's comfortable for them. And you just gently rock them and swing them in the blanket. That's always a really lovely thing to do. Another nice one is you could have your baby on a blanket, on a sort of a slippery floor mat, lying down on their back. Just gently pull them towards you on the blanket or push them away, towards you and away. And so they're sliding along on their backs. You could also do this on, you get those soft plastic changing mats. You could put baby on that and slide them towards you, slide them away on the changing mat, and then again from side to side. And it's just starting. They are still, and then suddenly they move, and they're still, and suddenly they move. And this is all really good vestibular stimulation. With that, of course, the lovely thing is going for a walk with your baby, because as you walk, that's their head moving through space. And when they're little, it's really nice to do it in a sling after like the first 2 to 4 weeks, once you've gotten comfortable with using a sling. And babies at this stage is facing you, they're scooped up nicely in a good position, and they're close to you, they're being held by you, so they're quite happy in a sling. And yes, your baby will probably fall asleep, but it's just a lovely vestibular stimulation. And being in a pushchair is a vestibular stimulation, of course. However, as I've explained, in this stage, babies really are craving to be held. So a lot of times people will say to me, I put my baby in the pushchair and he cries for the entire walk, he screams. And that's really common. And it is because, as I keep saying, that baby just wants to be held. So if you can, in those first 3 months, lay off the pushchair ever so slightly and rather go for walks in the carrier while they're still light and it's not so heavy for you, and you are building these windows where you are doing this lovely calm alert awake time where they are lying on their backs and feeling you close by, then it's not such a big adaptation for them to then be put on their backs in a pushchair and expected to be happy there like that. So rather spend time when they're feeling comforted that you are close to them, doing these lovely activities with them before you put them on their backs in a pushchair and go for a walk. So rather stick to the sling as much as you can, knowing that there's going to be times you have to have them in a pushchair. So those are all my little stimulation activities that you can start implementing in the first stage of development. If your baby isn't doing most of these things, I'm pretty sure it's okay, because 3 months is still quite little. And as I say, nowadays, developed milestones are so much later and coming along later, and it's not a worry. However, what I want you to be checking in these stages are if your baby, when they lie on their back, is completely flopped out. And I'm not talking in the early stages, I'm talking by the time your baby is hitting the 3-month mark. If their arms are flopped out to their side, so they're kind of creating like a W off their bodies, and they're never really bringing their hands into the midline together, or they're never bringing their hands to the mouth. They're very much stuck out here. The same will be for the legs. They're really flopped out like a little froggy. They're not moving. They're not lifting their legs up off the ground at all. They're not bringing their foot soles together. Or if they're lying on their tummies and they just are not able to be lifting that head for a little while and turning it to the side. Ideally, by 3 months, I'd want them to be trying to get up onto their elbows and lifting the head even just for a moment and then coming back down. So if you find your baby looks almost like they're stuck to the ground in those positions, both on the tummy and on the back, then I would be more concerned at 3 months, and I would say seek help from your GP or your health visitor. Whereas if they are moving, they're doing those movements and they're not in those postures I've just described, you're okay if they're not doing everything else. So for this stage, those are the things where I'm going to say it's a good idea to get help if your baby's quite flat in both positions and not able to move much. The other things I want you to take note of in the first 3 months, but particularly actually in the first 2 weeks, is to have a look at your baby's feet. Are the little feet really curved inwards? So it's like the big toe is curved up, constantly pointing up towards the body, rather than ever coming down where the toes are pointing downwards. They're always coming up. So the feet are almost horizontal more than vertical. or they've got a big curve on the inner border of the foot, because this could be a really common condition we call positional talipes, and it's something that's pretty easy to sort out if you spot it early. So ideally, you're going to pick that up in the first 2 weeks. All babies will do it for a little bit, but then they come out of it for quite a lot of time. But when we're going beyond the 2 week mark, if those little feet are just constantly curved upwards towards the body, then we're going to get extra help. I can put a link in the show notes to my positional talipes tutorial, which will help you to correct it at home if that's the case. And then the other thing you're going to be looking for, maybe not specifically in the first 2 weeks, but in the early stages of the first 3 months, is the head turning preference, which I've already said to you. And this is going to become clear when your baby is on their back, constantly looking in one direction, or when you're helping them to track the moving object, they're not able to look in both directions equally. And then you either reach out to your GP or your health visitor or a physiotherapist in your area. Then what is really important is that you make sure that your baby isn't stuck on their back, always looking in one direction, because that will then affect the head shape and give them flattening on the back of the head on one side. I've got the online course that I'm always talking about, which will help to rectify that. Also, if you've noticed your baby doesn't have a head turning preference, but you're starting to notice a flattening appearing just across the middle of the back of the head, then you can again reach out to your GP, health visitor, physiotherapist. There's a free download which helps you to improve head shape if it's already started to become a problem. But if you've got head shape that's a problem because of a head turning preference, then you're probably going to need more than just the little PDF. So that's my course I spoke about, or a physio in your area, or your GP or healthcare visitor will be able to guide you more on that. So that's it for the first stage. As I say, it's kind of 3 months, and I hope you found that helpful. I hope you are able to implement those little stimulation techniques whenever it suits your baby, when your baby is calm and alert, when they're not overstimulated and upset. And I look forward to continuing this series. Obviously, the next episode will be the 3 to 6 month mark, where your baby can do quite a lot more than they are able to in the first 3 months. So I look forward to you joining me then. And as always, I wish you all the best and all the best for your baby.